What's up, Canes fans? It's your boy, the host, Will Holloway, back again to bring to you great quality content when it comes to this youth. Unfortunately, today I will have to run the show Olo Dolo solo because some things are happening with Mark, and that's all right. We're gonna keep them in your prayers, keep them in your thoughts, whatever you choose to do. But you all know I have no problems doing the Q&A and asking, how does everybody feel, things of that nature. Keep it a little bit more professional because it's Mark's show. I mean, we can have a good time and talk and laugh, but for the most part, we'll try to keep it professional because we're on Mark Rogers TV, Miami Hurricanes Live. A lot of things have been happening down at Coral Gables, down in Miami, mainly because it's the first couple of days of the University of Miami being strapped up. Okay, we're talking about Miami putting on helmets and shoulder pads. So all of the talk, all of the off-season hype, that stuff kind of goes out the window now that we've had our padded practice and we're moving forward in full pad practices all the way through the season, excluding days where we'll be off or days where we'll be prepping for the next game. As far as like day before, 24 hours before, 48 hours before, we kind of take the pads off. There has been a couple of people injury wise that I want to go ahead and start that out with. If you're here, go ahead and hit the thumbs up and let us know that you're here. Then also hop into the comment section with the hashtag Live Squad. Yes, we do Live Squad on my channel where it originated, but we also do the hashtag Live Squad here on the Miami Hurricanes channel, Mark Rogers TV. Also, if you have any questions, comments, concerns that you want the H1H to go ahead and speak on, please let us know in the comment section below while the live feed is going, or put the hashtag rewatch squad if you come on, if you happen to pop up later on once the video has uploaded, and let us know a question that you want to talk about there, okay? Appreciate it. Let's keep on going. One of the big injuries that popped out for the University of Miami is starting left tackle, um, first round draft pick, potential left tackle Zion Nelson has been out with a knee injury. Now, it is an undisclosed knee injury. We don't know what exactly has gone down with the young man, but about 3 weeks to a month ago, a picture came out where he was in a big brace. And there was talks that it was just a knee scope and it was nothing serious and leave it alone. Well, come to find out he's going to miss the first 2 weeks of the season. Okay. And I'm hoping that he'll be ready to go because stepping into Kyle Field, stepping into uh, Texas A&M and having to deal with that big environment as your first game of the season could be a bit rough. It could be a bit rough for Zion to come out there and, being in football shape is one thing. Being well conditioned is another. Being well in shape is one thing. But being able to put it together and be in football shape, ready to go, we'll have to see. And it's one of those things where when we cross that road, we will get there. But I'm hoping uh, that someone can step up because that's a big concern for me. And I like to try to let it roll down my back and act like it's cool. But it's genuinely a tough thing because we need all of our best players healthy. Just everyone says that. All right, we need our guys ready to go and ready to contribute. Well, with him missing early on reps, him missing all of camp, that can be a big wrench into what we want to be and what we want to achieve moving forward at the University of Miami. Okay, because the way that this staff looks at things, if you're not here to contribute, we are looking for the people who are healthy to be out here. All right. And again, that's no slight. That's no slight, no slam, no disrespect whatsoever to Zion Nelson. I think he's a really good player. I'm not disrespecting him. All I'm saying is you have to get with it. All right. Jafari Harvey said it best. Either you're out there competing with your brothers or you're not, you're gonna be left behind. And that's just a fact. Okay, especially with the level of coaching that these young men are getting. John Campbell, who a bunch of people thought was just off to the wayside, whatever we out recruited him, he can move on with his life. He's more than likely your left tackle. And then even when Zion does get healthy, he's gonna have to come back and beat him out. for the job. That's only fair. That's only fair. Okay. So that's just speaking on the Zion Nelson situation. I'm also a little under the weather, you all. So bear with me. Bear with me. I'm hoping that it's nothing that serious, just a nice, this nasal cough or whatever, lack of sleep from camp or whatever. But I am definitely under the weather also, if you can't tell or you can't hear. Get our first question up here from Chris Mitchell. Thank you, Chris Mitchell, for being here. He says, "Hey, Wholesome, how many catches do you think Elijah Arroyo is going to have? Dude looks like a monster now." Yeah, I like him. I really like what he's bringing to the table now. I think that he's a little bit more balanced of a tight end than anything we have on the roster. Skinner has been a really big red zone and receiving threat for Miami in camp. People can't hang with him. People can't cover him. Okay. Excuse me. He's too big for our DBs. He's too fast for majority of our linebackers. So, and if they put it up in a way, he's the only one that could go up and get the ball. He's been a really big mismatch for Miami in that sense. Uh, Will Mallory unfortunately is in a red jersey, a red non-contact jersey. All right. Now it's no need to write him off and say that I'm done with him, whatever. But we're getting to that point where it's like, what's going on here? Okay, could it be precautionary, or is it, hey, this dude is just injury riddled? Because the conversation always will be when Will Mallory is blah 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 when healthy. Will Mallory is a second team all conference guy. Will Mallory is a first team all conference guy. Will Mallory is a second team all American. You got to have all those kind of questions when you talk about Will Mallory. But the first and main question is usually always going to be when healthy. Okay, when healthy. Now, that is a very unfortunate reality of playing this contact sport in which we love in football. People are going to get hurt. It's a very physical, demanding, and dependent position. And especially on the fronts, tight end, defensive tackle, offensive tackle, guard, and center, running back, linebacker. It's a lot of contact, which boom, boom, boom. It's a lot going on in that. All right, it's not an easy situation. So what we have to make sure we're doing is keeping up on what our young men are down. So for all we know, Coach Cristobal may be holding him out because it's precautionary, and he wants to make sure that we have Will Mallory, a healthy Will Mallory, to go when it's time to go. Because at the end of the day, we can get away with Will Mallory being a little against Bethune Cookman, a little against Southern Mississippi. But there's going to come a time, not only with Texas A&M, but then we get another week in Middle Tennessee State where, and then we get a bye week, and then we round off into conference play where you are going to need your best players to be healthy. So if you're telling me that Zion Nelson and Will Mallory are going to be held off for a little bit until they're healthy, all I'm saying is they shouldn't have guaranteed positions. All right. But they are some of our better players. Now, Elijah Arroyo, people could argue Elijah Arroyo is better than Will Mallory. It's a small sample size, but some people say that. Some people already feel like Skinner, when he puts on weight, will be better than Will Mallory. We'll see. Okay, we will see. But when it comes to the injury bug at Miami, it's been kind of kept down with only Ryan Rodriguez, Zion Nelson, and Will Mallory being three of the 100 or so players out there that are kind of being held off due to injury. Okay, thank you so much, Chris, for your question. Again, for those of you all who are a little confused, no, this is not just the H1H channel. You all know where to find me at the Wholesome with Holloway, HOLSUM, Holloway, HOLLOWAY, and the number one. That's my personal channel. I'm here um, with Mark Rogers TV, Miami Hurricanes, talking about the camp update and things of that nature. So Just want to let you all know what's going on with that. Thank you, Roger, for the hashtag Live Squad. We definitely appreciate that. Chris Brown says, that's my biggest concern. Zion is not going to pan out for us. Sorry, not sorry. I mean, that's your opinion. I hope that you are wrong, and I think you probably hope you're wrong too. I don't see you being someone who just wants to see young people fail. I don't think that that's what you're trying to say here, but what you're trying to say is that it's a big concern of yours that he has all this offseason hype 2 years in a row, and then we magically see him pop up in a sling, and we weren't giving any heads up. I can see where that would become a concern for you. Kay Allen says, do you think with a healthy Campbell, he can start and hold on to that spot? That's where I'm a little iffy. I don't know. I'm a little iffy when it comes to that. When it comes to the situation of health, because here's my lineup right now. If everyone's healthy, Zion Nelson uh, next to Jalen Rivers, Ja'Kai Clark, then I have Justice Uluwasi at right guard, and I have Scaife at right tackle. That's my starting offensive line. With Zion stepping out due to injury, that means you put Campbell over there at left tackle. Then you can have the conversation of what you want to do at guard. Okay, you have a transfer in Logan Salapalu, you have a transfer in Jonathan Dennis, and Justice Uluwasi, who are all interior guys. So and these are guys you trust, whether from your time at Oregon or whether time at Miami. So we could, let's say, for example, you go Campbell, then at left guard, you might go with Dennis, then Clark, then Justice Uluwasi, and then at right tackle, go with Rivers. Or you could go Campbell, Rivers, Ja'Kai, and then go with Dennis or Logan Salapalo at right guard, and then trust Justice Uluwasi at right tackle. Or skate, it's so many different ways, which is why the elite coaches make sure they cross train. Make sure, because until you really know where young men are and where they've been set up and where we build chemistry, you want to build chemistry all the way up to that point in different spots. Okay. So I think he can start and hold on to the left tackle spot until Zion comes back. And then if Zion comes back, when Zion comes back, I think he will come in at left tackle and may kick Campbell over to right guard or right tackle. But I think Campbell has a place on this offensive line. Okay. You all excuse me, I gotta step away really quick. I'll be right back. Excuse me. Thank you all for being patient with me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay. Sorry about that. Like I said, fighting and battling sickness trying to take over. I got it. Chris Brown says, bro, I'm with you on that. Everybody needs to be ready to go. Absolutely. Samahama Nkwamu comments and says, Daryl Jackson is a beast. Yes, he is. Daryl Jackson might be our best. Him and Messador, I think they might be our best defensive players. Defensive front, guys. I say defensive front. I think Avante Williams is our best defensive player. Let me put that out there. I think Avante Williams is the best defensive player on the team. But we do have to acknowledge the fact that he has to They got to go out. I think on the fronts, I think Daryl Jackson and Messidor are your best guys. I really do. How is Pittsburgh being picked above us after losing the quarterback and wide receiver? What do you think? I mean, at the end of the day, you all have to remember we have all this hype, yes, but what Coach Cristobal has done in his time was done at Oregon. Okay. And a lot of people look at Miami as a mess and something that has to be fixed. Okay, you don't just pop up one day and go from being absolute average or booty cheeks in some people's viewpoint, and then you pop up in our champions. Okay, and the beautiful part about it is Supreme Team 7, at the end of the day, we will get a chance to line up and prove who the better team is on that particular Saturday at whatever time we line up and play. Now, was Pittsburgh way better than Miami last year as a team? Absolutely. But on that particular day in the old Heinz Field Stadium, we beat them with Manny Diaz and his staff. Okay? The game winning interception came from James Williams. All right? It was done. And it happened. That day, we were the better team. Overall, we the better team? Heck no. But that day, we were. So at the end of the day, all the preseason hype, we can't get upset about it. You can't feel disrespected, but it's no need to really let it throw you off too much because guess what? We gotta line up and play. We have to line up and play eventually. Alan Herdman says, H1H, stay hydrated. Thank you, man. Thank you for the positive energy. I appreciate it. Roger Dodger says the ACC seems wide open this year with 6 teams having a chance to win the conference. Uh, uh, it seems wide open, yes, but I don't understand. I do, you know what? I do understand. I do understand why people have kind of forgotten about Clemson. But let's remember, Clemson is an established brand and an established program. I'm not scared of them. I don't have to kiss their ass. It is what it is. They had a tough end to the season last year. They didn't play too well last year. Their quarterback stunk up the building last year. They know that. We know that. He's going to have a way shorter leash if he goes out there and plays the same way. They got a 5-star quarterback, and we know how Dabo feels when he gets a 5-star quarterback to go out there, a 5-star backup, and someone who's a returning starter from the year before that didn't do too well. Okay, he told Kelly Bryant to kick rocks. The guy that had just had him in the playoffs the year before for Trevor Lawrence, who won it as a freshman and never saw a championship win again. So you have that in your back pocket. Let's also look at the simple fact that North Carolina, maybe we were a year early on North Carolina. Majority of those guys come back excluding quarterback. Okay. Unfortunately, the Wake Forest quarterback won't be playing this year. I'm praying for that young man. NC State is an established program. So I get what you're saying. It is wide open, but we have to remember until proven otherwise, until we get out there against Clemson at the end of this season or towards the end of this season and beat them on the football field, they still run the conference. I mean, they missed the conference championship for the first time in 8 seasons. Okay, let's not get that misconstrued. Again, you are a Pac 12 guy, you're a USC fan, you're looking from the outside in. I appreciate your viewpoint. As someone who studied the conference and studied a particular program in the conference for a majority of my life and covering it for half a decade plus now, I can understand that Clemson might have just had a down year. They're still a well established program. And we have to make sure that we go out on that football field and beat them on the football field. Okay. Thank you for your comment. Michael Long, wholesome. What do you think our weak link is, offense or defense? I'll give you both. I believe until we see what Coach Josh Gaddis does on the football field, offense is definitely has a lot of question marks. But you would have to say the defense is the weak link out of the two. Here's why: the elite coaching that we're getting on the offensive line, the well-established quarterback that we have. Now there is a question mark at wide receiver, but guess what? The offensive coordinator runs that wide receiver core, and he's going to call plays. So he's not going to put people out there that can't execute just because a star's next to your name or just because of what you've done in the past. Because he has a job to get done also. All right, so let's not get that misconstrued. He will put the best wide receivers out there to execute whatever play call it is because his ass is on the line. All right, let's not get that misunderstood. Josh Gaddis just won the Boys Award. He's stepping into a situation where Coach Cristobal, Coach Mirabal, Coach Pata is going to give him a good to great offensive line by the end of this season. And he already has a well established quarterback. His behind is on the line. And he is not going to allow wide receivers that can't run the routes right, that can't create separation, that can't attack the ball at the highest level, to be the reason why he's deemed a bad offensive coordinator this season. Trust me on that. Trust me on that. Okay? That he won't let that go. Telling you. Yeah, I heard what Zach had to say about him. Hey, people get exiled out of things. He got kicked out the frat and he's mad. God bless him. Hopefully he stays away from women. All right, Falcon RX with a $3.05 donation with a good old Trail 5. H1H, welcome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This Texas recruiting class is crazy. We'll see if it finishes out that way. We'll see. Do you see us losing any LB to the portal? There's a couple I want to leave, but they haven't so far. So, hey, much love to them. No Leonard Taylor? Oh, is that like my best player comment? Okay. I mean, if that's what you believe, that Leonard Taylor is the best one, no problem. Eric Galloway. Shouts out to you, brother. I'm happy that you have love and you appreciate Leonard Taylor. I have love and appreciate him also, but I think Avante Williams is like a top 15 pick caliber safety. I think he is a bad, bad man. I really do. I really do. J Love T, what's up, man? Good to see you. I really appreciate you. I really, really, really appreciate you for being here and supporting me on Mark Rogers TV Miami. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Will Miami finally have a team that makes adjustments during the game this year? I would say the simple answer to that is yes. Why? Because we have position coaches and coordinators that are known for it. Kevin Steele is, I know we're getting 65-year-old Kevin Steele, 64, 65. So I know we're getting that version of him. But listen, y'all, this dude is good. This dude is good. He's a very, very, I wanted Will Muschamp. I'm just saying. I particularly wanted Tom Herman on offense, Will Muschamp on defense. That's the package that I particularly wanted. But Josh Gaddis and Kevin Steele, that's a nice combo. Okay. The beautiful thing about Coach Steele is he's not alone. The co-defensive coordinator and the person that's also coaching the position right next to him, inside linebacker, is a great in-game adjuster himself, and Charlie Strong. So they will be tit for tat. Then you have Coach Adai over the top. You have Coach my Samoan brother up on the front, and JT off the edge, and Coach right off the edge. They'll probably be more in run stop pass rush, but as far as coverage, scheme, putting the defense together, that'll more than likely be done by the older, Coach Steele and Coach Strong. Okay. Oh, snap. Flo is in the house. Keep grinding, brother. Love you. Much love, man. $10 donation to Mark Rogers. Thank you, thank you, thank you, man. Thank you for being here. That means a lot. Thank you. All right. Y'all keep the questions flowing, man. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Do we do have a step up in defensive coaching and guys who can teach proper tackling? Absolutely. I agree. I agree. Yes, sir. If you haven't already, please hit that like button and go ahead and drop the hashtag Live Squad. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And again, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything you want me to address, anything you're wondering about my thoughts on a so and so player, team, coach, drop it in the chat. We got about 40 more minutes here, and I would love to be able to get to a bunch of that and answer for you all. Okay. Alrighty. Wholesome, do you think Gaddis is only here for one season? I don't know if his desire is to be a head coach. If it is, maybe, because here's my thing. If Coach Gaddis wants to go on, then he needs to get TBD in the first round. And in my opinion, win the conference his first season at Miami. Like if we're talking about an offensive coordinator that just had a big spring, meaning took a big step to win the Boys Award, the Best Assistant Coach Award. Then he takes a flyer on a job like the University of Miami after leaving Michigan, where he kind of had things set up in a nice way. The thing that he could do to shoot to a whole different stratosphere would be to get the University of Miami in Charlotte, number one, win every single ACC coastal game, number one. That's the first thing he could do, ACC coastal game, period. Then get on the same field with either NC State or Clemson, not look outmatched, be on a great level with his quarterback in TVD, and slay the beast and win the ACC. Now, if he were to do those things, then I definitely could see him being in position for a head coaching position. It could be his alma mater in Wake Forest. It could be, could be in different kind of spots, but that's definitely where I would go with it. Okay, that's where I would go with it, in my opinion. If he wants that kind of job, a head coaching job at the Power Five level, get Miami into the playoffs and get Miami his first ACC championship. Okay, that's the way he does it. All right, y'all. Give me another second here. I gotta step away. I feel it. Give me a second. Oh, my apologies, y'all. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. NFL scouts rave about Daryl. Yeah, I feel you, but at the end of the day, dog. At the end of the day, talk is talk. It's time to play ball. How many things do you think Coach Steele and Coach Gaddis will hold back the first 4 games of the year? Well, here's a great response to that. Not much. I think that they can hold things back the first 2 weeks. Not saying you empty the kitchen sink against A&M, but see, it's not overblown that people hold things for later on in the season. It's mainly because you, depending on you being a new coach or you being around for a bit, or you like that kind of stuff really helps the teaching process, guys. That's where we get a lot of when it comes to these play calls, the offensive coordinator has to have confidence that these young men can execute the play call. Okay, these young men aren't robots. They don't just go out there because you hit square, axe Madden, uh, slants, and hit square. That they're gonna go out there and run it exactly perfect like it does on Madden or NC Dub sometimes. You have to rep these things in practice against the look that your scout team gives you or against your first team defense. Well, if the coach doesn't feel confident in the play call because the young men can't even execute it in practice, what makes you think they're going to go out there and call it when they're actually counting stats and there's a clock up there? It's not much. The level is not high at all. All right. So most times they don't necessarily hold a bunch back. They just don't, the confidence isn't there just yet. All right. The confidence isn't there just yet. Now, that happens over time. It grows over time. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger over time. But at face value, it really doesn't happen that often. Okay. Now, you could hold certain things and be very vanilla and basic in your approach the first 2 games of the season. But you have to be able to spring a trap, all right, on Texas A&M because they are going to. I'm gonna tell you this: what they have already done is broken down Josh Gaddis at Michigan. They've already broken him down because there's nothing for them to go off of him in Miami because the spring game was extremely vanilla and trash. Okay, absolute utter trash. Okay, that you can't leave that on there. You have to understand that these coaches, when it comes to reviewing film or putting something out there, sometimes you could over review, right? So what you would do as an offensive coordinator is you'll put a play out there. Let's say, for example, you got the tight end running a nice little bubble to pull a linebacker in, and the slot receivers running, let's say, a deep over to get right over the linebackers, but not too far where the safeties can address them. And then you do like a post where you attack the safety. Okay. Well, you could really mess with their heads, and they're like, "Oh, they come out of this formation. This is gonna happen. This is gonna happen. This is gonna happen." Okay, cool. You may rush around and have your tight end do the same thing. Have your slot receiver do the same deep over. Have your uh, outside X do a post. But now we got a sluggo out from the tight end. Okay, let me draw up what I'm talking about. Give you an example of what I mean. Right. So you all were able to visualize the first one, but I'll give you a visual aid. I'll write it out for you. Okay. So let's say the tight end here, slot X. All right. Linebacker here, addressing the tight end. Then let's say you got a safety playing over top over here. And then you got a corner playing over here, right? So curl to hold him, deep over to hold him, post to hold him, right? That's what we talked about, right? Okay. So let's say, for example, you have that. This is just something simple, right? You can even get fancy with it. And instead of having that inline tight end, now he steps off the line, motions over, and more of a slot look, okay? Because that's going to force them to address it differently in that way. So then that linebacker will still have to come out, but now this safety has to pick who. What am I going to adjust to? Who am I going to help? Am I going to help the corner on this post to have it over top? Okay, so now that safety has to scoot a little bit over also. So now I said like a curl out, right? Or curl go, right? So what I mean by that is that curl now turns into more of a wheel outside, right? Now, of course, you need pass protection and blah, blah, blah to be able to do this, but you look at that, and on film, that linebacker might jump that simple curl because they expect that to come. But now you done got over top of them. Now that safety is running out with that deep over, or trying to pick between whether they want to step up or step back to help with the post. Okay, those are little tweak things that you see coaches would do to switch things up. Hey, we put on film that when we come out of this, we run this play, and this is the route combo, right? Well, film is a big thing nowadays. All right, film is huge. So his DB coach, this defensive coordinator, is going to hammer home to these young men what route combinations you can expect out of certain formations based on what we put on film. But again, they're already breaking down Coach Josh Gaddis's best plays, his average plays, his most frequent plays, his red zone plays from the season before at Michigan. That's what they are going to go off of. Then they're going to mix it in with what he could do at Miami. Now, this is the stuff that you do in the spring. This is stuff you do in the off season because A&M doesn't have big games either before us. All right, we're their kind of first test. All right. Now we did something uh, offensive wise that you could do to really, really throw somebody off. Right. So now let's do it defensively. Right. So let's say, for example, when it comes to how we would play a certain coverage, right? So let's say we got our LB here, we got our strong safety here, we got our corner over here, right? And let's say we're going up against 11 personnel, all right? So we'll say 11 personnel at 3-by-1, technically tight end makes the third. So same kind of formation, slot wide receiver, an X wide receiver, and a tight end, right? Now let's say, for example, we put on film. We always put on film that we go the first 2 weeks, we go man in this. Okay. Let's say, for example, we put on film the strong safety is on that slot, the corner has the wide receiver, and the linebacker has the tight end, right? Cool. But then we get in the game where, hey, we come out of this, we might even do the same hand signals just to throw them off. Hey, 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 hey. Pat your chest. Me, man, right? But it was a spring of trap. We're actually in cover 3. Now, that linebacker is the hole. The strong safety is alley flat, and the corner is deep thirds. So you think that out route that you really want to run with the tight end is wide open because you think it's man, and you trust your tight end on a linebacker, right? Because more likely than not, they look at it as what? A mismatch. Okay. So let's say you try to run off. Let's say, for example, they tried to do a slant here and a slant here and an out here, right? Because they want to run off the DBs and allow that tight end to go one-on-one with the linebacker and make him miss in open space. They expect him to be more athletic. Well, it's actually cover 3. So when that quarterback takes that second step off of his drop back and tries to throw that out, all he sees is number 0, Avante Williams, number 0, James Williams, flying down and reading that out perfectly and hopping right in front of that thing. Right visual aid for you. All you see is big old 6'5" number 0 flying down and catching that ball in stride, and they're striking the band up. Go Canes, blah blah blah. Those are just little nuances that you would do just to make it hard on and it's basic. I mean, coaches get real extreme with this, and we call it like spring a trap and blah blah blah. Just to give you all a visual aid of some of the things I was talking about. But thank you so much for asking this question. We got a lot of folks in the house. Near and dear good friend of mine, Coach Hayes, is in the house. What's up, Coach? Good to see you. Yeah, man. I had to bring out the whiteboard and let them know. I had to let them know, man. We appreciate you so much for being here, Coach, and being here, being supportive while you're here. Again, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, go ahead and drop that in the chat, and your boy the H1H will try his hardest to get to it. Jeff, what's up, family? No time, no see. What's good, H1H? How do you think, or who do you think would be our next commitment? I think it's that lineman out of the pancake dude out of up out of Pennsylvania or something like that. I think that'll probably be our next commitment. Uh, with Zion out, how would you construct the offensive line? I think I answered this one, didn't I? Okay, I'll answer it. Zion at left tackle. Zion gone. So Campbell at left tackle. Uh, I would still leave Rivers over there. Jakai, and then I would go with Justice Uluwasi, and then never mind. I'm gonna go with Logan Sakapalu at right guard, and then Justice Uluwasi at right tackle. How many games Tallahassee wins this year? Zero, I hope. I hear there's a lot of drop balls at practice. Is it a concern right now? Not really. I missed your last call in show H1. Can you do it again? It's that time of year for the fans to interview. On my live, I will, but I don't know if Mark would be okay with me doing it on his channel here, only because you know how we get. We get comfortable. We start to talk about our genuine feelings, and a couple f bombs start dropping, and I wouldn't want to do that on MarkRogersTV. Is Will Mallory going to finally live up to his potential this year? He looks like he got his physical right. Here's the thing. Consistency with his hands. I think Will Mallory looks good. I know Will Mallory can play the game. I know Will Mallory can run routes. I need to know, can Will Mallory consistently catch the football and get north for first downs and touchdowns? Wholesome, personal question. Which win would mean more to you? Beating Tallahassee in the ACC championship or beating Florida in the Orange Bowl? Florida in the Orange Bowl. Because beating Tallahassee, we've done that. But we haven't beaten Florida in a while. We have yet to beat Florida. So being able to get those dudes would be big. Yeah, man. Being able to get those dudes would be big. Okay. Look, it's our date open the house. What's up? What's up? What's up? How many games do you think we win in Coach Cristobal's and this staff's first year? Regular season, I'm hoping either 9 or 10. I'm going to say 9 because I think that we split, but we still end up losing some stupid games because we're just not there yet. Total, I'm going to say 11 because I have us winning the ACC championship game, and I have us winning our bowl, which will probably be the Orange Bowl. Because I don't know if we made the playoffs with a bunch of losses, with already 3 losses. This time last year, you had reviewed the defensive line drills and kind of opened our eyes to just how bad the training was and that the technique wasn't quite there. Any improvement in what you've seen so far? Big and huge improvements. But it's also been super quiet and even more secretive and private under Mario Cristobal than it has ever been. We used to complain because it was like, well, they were hiding stuff from us because they knew it sucked. Them hiding things away from people who aren't Canes is mainly because there's still a bunch of growth that has to be done. But I know that they're grinding and they're working, and people who are coaching now are doing, or they know what they're doing. I don't even know if I can find this video. I think it popped up on my Instagram feed. Remember how crazy and critical I was a defensive line coach, the previous defensive line coach? The man has, I watch his drills at Duke, and they are completely different drills. They're under a sled. Okay, they're under a sling with the sled. There's pads with the defensive lineman. He literally had his defensive tackle under the sled with a sling, a pad right in front of you. Right, he moves the ball. He had to contact and move the sling, single man sled out the way. Then he had to club rip. Then he had to shuffle and meaning go over those pads, just like linemen on the ground. Move your feet over those pads. Then he had to track the ball, track the dummy with the ball that was on a motorized cart, moving like it was a stretch play. And he had to wrap it, and as he's falling, he had to strip the ball out and hit the ground. I didn't see our defensive line coach do that in his time at Miami. He goes to Duke under brand new head coach Elko, and he's running way better drills. So at the end of the day, it was a Manny Diaz problem. All right. We aren't holding anything back. Week 3 versus A&M. We're going to throw everything we got, including the kitchen sink. We'll see. We'll see. H1H needs to do the Madden tele telestractor on the screen. I don't. What does that mean? Help me out. Fred Langston, what's up, family? Good to see you. Whoa. Hey, George. Come on, man. Let's be respectful now. No need to make those kind of comments, dude. Come on. Let's be respectful of one another now. That's a bit much, man. Can't wait for the Miami Tide. I mean, I was ready to go. I don't know. I mean, of course, things are going on with Mark. But we, love and appreciate Mark, but I don't know what was going on with that dude. I don't know if he was sent a different league, but he wasn't able to make it again this week. So hopefully we get a chance to uh, do the debate next time or something. We get a chance to be on the same screen together, so I can educate him on who tight end you and is. It will always be, and it's the University of Miami. Okay. Any other questions for you all? Because I know a lot of people want to talk about ifs, whiffs, or whatever. Who's this and who's that? Any other questions about training camp and practice and all that kind of stuff? You all let me know. Uncle Bill? Uncle Bill, did you have a comment? I know you said, okay, there you go. Mr. Host, well, how many wins this year? Is 10 realistic? I think so. See, I really think that 10 is definitely realistic. See, what people don't understand about realism here is reality is what you make. Okay. Now, a lot of people have this, preconceived notion that if you follow certain viewpoints and beliefs, that it's already predetermined and you're just living it out. Okay. Well, when it comes to a sport where what you do in the moment, in that exact second, can it can definitely be the reason why something goes left or right. Okay. If you're a quarterback and you know you're in cover two and you hesitate for a second and you wait too long, drifting back, all right, and it's 4th and 5, and they need a curl, and you think they're going to go with the deep out route, and you keep drifting back instead of jumping the short route, and then he catches it, and he's able to get upfield. It's a first down. Is that predetermined, or did you hesitate too long? You hesitated too long. Okay, if we're in man coverage and we're in banjo coverage, and you don't communicate as an outside corner with your inside corner that you're going to take the out and he takes the inside release, and you keep pressing with the outside guy inside and you never pop outside, and now that slot receiver is touchdown because both of y'all went with the in breaking route. Is that predetermined or did you make a mistake in the moment? Okay, so when you talk about something being realistic, this game comes down to a couple plays. Excuse me. This game comes down to a couple plays where you make the play or you do not. Notre Dame was a blowout because Tracy Mandy hops in front of an interception. If he read the play perfectly. He could have sat there and just tackled him or swatted the ball away. But no, he went after the ball, caught it in stride, and took it to the crib. All right. It's about moments, affecting the game with a moment and making the touchdown, making the game still in tackle, making the big hit, not just allowing things to just come to you and you just do your job. So when someone says 10 wins isn't realistic, I get where you're coming from. All I'm asking you to do is open your mind up. Open your mind up to a pretty good quarterback. Open your mind up to an established quarterback, coach. Open your mind up to some established coordinators. Give us that. We having a tight end debate, you or not? No, I don't know what happened with that situation. Besides, we'll hopefully have it next week. Okay, hopefully. I know that you are you the person I'm supposed to be debating, or are you the guy? Are you the are you who I'm supposed to be debating, or is that someone else? That's all you had to say. What's the email? What's the email? I'm waiting. What's your email address? Shit. Hold on, let me see. Twitter. You sent it to Twitter? Did you send? Where did you send it? You got to remember, you got to send it to me, not Mark. Don't click on anything H1H. What are you talking about? What's your Twitter name, dude? Because it is whenever you're ready. What's your Twitter name from the Hawkeye on the Storm? Is it the Hawkeye on the Storm? Because that's interesting. Oh, okay, cool. You ain't said nothing. Twitter. What they say? There it is. Come on. No, I had not seen that yet. Are you concerned with the guys losing speed from the added weight, muscle, from the new strength conditioning? Last go around with Rick, we seemed slow. No, I think you bring up a really good point, man. I don't really think you bring up a. See, that's the thing. Aaron Feld is considered the number one. Like he is top tier. Everyone loves and appreciates Coach Feld. So he's number one. It's not like before where we went in different directions, okay, or what the strength coach wanted and the head coach wanted were opposites. We're talking about something that they work together. So I definitely think that doesn't work against each other. Well, he showed up. Let's see what you got.
I showed up and hey, I got to say this before we start, man. So Mark told me you were going to send me a link, but I'm like, I don't even know if he knows who I am. I don't even know if he's got my Twitter handle. I did
Nope.
find it funny. Baby Shaq said, sounds like you're about to get hacked.
Oh yeah, I just kind of ignored that one because
I,
I'm like,
pro-
well,
I
we'll
promise
see.
I'm not trying to hack you. No, I wanted to have this. I'll give you a real quick backstory. I just got done working for our local news site. Just got done working at the Iowa State Fair, actually. And I ran into a guy from Jacksonville who's a huge Miami Hurricanes fan. And so I told him, I'm like, hey, we got a debate coming up tonight. So I hope he's on here watching right now. If he is, let's get it on. I think this is an interesting discussion. I did a little bit of, I wish I had more time to do more digging, but I've got some numbers here that are interesting. And I think maybe people are going to see me as not so much of a homer once I get done running through these numbers.
Well, I definitely, when I talked to Mark about the situation towards the end, I said, well, if he's talking about recently, then they got us. Now if we're talking about overall, if we're talking about at its peak, I think Miami is kind of far out and away the number one tight end producing program. But you talk about all time, I would say Iowa is definitely in the top 4 or 5. The only other programs I would put in front of it may be like Notre Dame, but Notre Dame's been playing football since way yonder.
Yeah.
But the last couple of years, last couple of tight ends, it's been really good stuff. I mean, I think it'll be in respect. You're not a Tallahassee guy, so I won't have to go back and forth with you in disrespect, and we're just taking shots at each other. You're not a Florida Gator, so I won't have to go back and forth to disrespect you in that manner either. And you're not an Ohio State Suckeye, so I don't have to worry about that part either.
But you and Mark seem to get along, right?
Well,
he's
the voice of college football.
That's right.
He's not just, and he went to Kent State, so it's
right.
different.
Yeah.
I'm born and raised in Miami, and I went to North Dakota State, so it's different.
There's no grudge between Kent State and Miami, Florida.
No, there's no between our alma maters of Kent State and NDSU. So
there's there's certainly probably a thicker grudge between Kent State and Miami, Ohio, because they're both in the MAC, but not for Miami, Florida.
Right.
You mind if I share you some of these numbers that I came up? Just a quick compiling of information. So here's what I found, and I think you and I are actually. This is not going to be some mean-spirited debate because I actually think you and I are going to agree on a lot of this stuff. And this is just one criteria because that's something Mark keeps bringing up to me. Well, what's the criteria? We have to establish a common criteria, and I agree with that. So here's the deal. I thought initially, let's look at this century. So we'll start in 2000 on. That's 22 years. I think if you go further back than that, we start to look like Nebraska fans and the disillusion in Lincoln. So let's just stick from 2000 to 2022. So here's what I found out. Iowa has had 11 draft picks since 2000. And before we go on, I want to establish this. I did not look up NFL statistics and whatnot. And the reason I did not, and although those, certainly both Iowa and Miami have their claims to make as it relates to NFL production. Because you look what George Kittle's doing right now. Certainly Miami with guys like Graham and Shockey, and we talk about those guys. But to me, when we're talking about tight end university, you have to look at who's producing the type of talent that scouts like, right? These scouts know what they're doing. So if they're getting drafted, I have trusted. If they end up being busts, to me, that's not the school's fault. That might be the player's fault after he leaves, right? Because I think those scouts know what they're doing. Is that a fair point?
That's an interesting take. I mean, I've had this debate more than just. I have a really good friend of mine. Shout out to Mr. Rubicon. He has this big viewpoint that it's not, Jimbo Fisher's fault that every quarterback he put out in the first round absolutely sucks at the National Football League level. I think that if you can't prepare them to be successful in the National Football League, then you have to question yourself about your preparation.
Sure.
But at face value, I definitely get where you're going. Go ahead.
And I also think there's a fine line there because if Jimbo Fisher has a reputation for doing that, that's one thing. But, if a guy gets drafted, if Miami has a tight end that gets drafted in the first round in 2005 and he ends up being a bust, but all these other tight ends that were drafted then or drafted throughout the last 20 years were not busts, and that probably tells me, hey, maybe he, whether it be an injury, which is beyond his control, certainly beyond the control of the university, regardless of the situation, I think there is that argument that can be made that should be part of the criteria. But here are the numbers from 2000. Miami with 14 total draftees at tight end since 2000. Iowa with 11. Okay, so fairly close there, but Miami clear edge. Iowa with 3 first rounders since 2000. That's since the year 2000. Miami with 5 first rounders. So again, an edge to Miami. And this is a number that I don't know if this is a real great. It's just kind of a quick data point that I thought I'd throw out there. Round average, because obviously we see those other 2 categories. Miami has the edge, but I think if we have a bunch of guys drafted in the 7th round and you're racking up numbers that way, then that you could argue that that's kind of skewing the final totals. Iowa is their round average for tight ends drafted since 2000, 3.818. So late 3rd round, that's the average. Miami, 3.57. So again, close. Miami certainly has the edge. Now, those numbers would tell me that Miami clearly is the better producing tight end school. Now, if we're looking at recency and we're going since 2010, here are the numbers. So Miami's had just 1 first rounder. We know their best NFL tight ends. I think you would agree with this: Jimmy Graham, David Njoku, Chris Herndon since 2010. And Chris Herndon, I don't know, you know his numbers better than I do. Has he been great? I know he's had some expectations, but is he still with New York? I don't even know where he's at anymore.
No, he just signed with the Saints earlier this week. Funny you asked that question. He signed with the Saints. He was up here close to me with the Vikings, but he injury riddled at that time. But he was actually a pretty good tight end for the Jets. Not too much. I mean, he had one season where he topped out about 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. So he was adequate, but nothing to jump off the screen.
So those are your 3 best tight ends since 2010. Are there's any doubt about that? Because the other options, here are the other guys that Miami's had drafted since 2010. Is it Diedrich Epps?
Correct? Diedrich Epps, Clive Walford,
Richard Gordon.
Yeah, Gordon was a 7th rounder. He was a blocker kind of guy. Yeah.
And is it Brevin Jordan?
And Brevin Jordan, drafted last year. And
drafted.
It was he injury riddled too, but it was just once he was a rookie last year.
Right.
Yeah.
Iowa since 2010. Here are the guys Iowa's had drafted. I think there's no question. And that's why I think you and I probably are going to agree on this, because I think Iowa is tight end you of the last 10 years. Miami collectively, certainly tight end you from 2000 to 2010. Right. And I think collectively they still own that title. But since 2010, I think Iowa, the clear favorite. Tony Moeaki, who was a 3rd-round draft pick, but was riddled with injuries, was a really good tight end in the NFL while he played and just could not stay healthy. That guy was a freak athletically. CJ Fedorowicz was a 3rd-round draft pick in 2014. People may not remember him. He was a starter in Houston for quite some time. He had to retire because of concussions. And then, of course, we know George Kittle, 5th-round draft pick, maybe the best tight end in the NFL now. It's arguable, but he has been sensational. TJ Hawkinson and Noah Fant, both drafted 1st round in 2019, the only time in the history of the NFL draft that 2 tight ends have been drafted in the 1st round the same year. So certainly since 2017, Iowa has been, I think, far and away the tight end. I also think Penn State, I brought up Penn State to Mark, at least as it relates to the last 5, 6, 7 years. Penn State's had their fair share. I'm trying to think, Mike Gesicki being one.
For the Dolphins. Yeah, I was going to say he's the one that jumps out to me.
Who's the other? There's a couple other guys. Let me look this up here, because you could also make a claim that they have had a claim in this. Jesse James.
Oh, yeah.
And
is he Penn State?
Yes.
I thought he was Pitt. Yeah, he's Penn State. Yeah.
And Pat Freiermuth.
I don't know who that is.
You don't know who Pat? Wow, no, it isn't Pat Fryer. Let me look up his stats, because Pat Freiermuth has been Nick Bowers. I don't know who that is. Let's see, Pat Freiermuth, NFL stats in 2021 for just last year for the Steelers: 60 catches, 497 yards, and 7 touchdowns.
Hey, Sean, I'm a Ravens fan, so I could give a crap less about that. I'm all over the place, but yeah.
So Penn State's had a good stretch as well, but I think it's clear that the schools that you brought up, Notre Dame, Miami, Iowa, USC back in the day, maybe
they were putting them out. I mean, they had some nice ones. I mean, I see the other thing I want to say in this conversation, because before I start spitting out stats and blah blah blah, are we equating what they've done in college, meaning all conference, all American, and statistics there, are we going to view them from that lens, or we're going to view them from when they transition to the NFL, their stats and their careers there? Which one do you want to go?
I think that's the conversation and the defining that needs to occur in these types of debates, because it's so easy to say, well, this school's DBU and this school's linebacker U, and well, what does that mean? You're right. What does that mean? Does that mean they're excelling at the college level? I hear the term tight end factory, like Iowa's a tight end factory. Is that the same thing?
Right.
as tight end you? Because if we're looking at tight end factory, then I think the criteria we just ran through, personally, I believe that's the correct criteria, because what are the best schools at developing tight ends for the next level? And that is, to me, almost, I don't say exclusively, but that should be evaluated based upon draft, upon the NFL draft, because again, you can't project forward and look at busts and whatnot. It's how did the college program develop them for the NFL, and I think you can measure that based upon where they're picked in the draft. Now, each draft is different, so there's going to be some leeway there. But I think that's a good conversation. And I haven't looked into the numbers as far as production at tight end at Miami. Obviously, if you have a school that runs, and Iowa's tight end last year, Sam Laporta, who, by the way, will be another, I think he's probably going to be a top 3 round draft pick next year, barring some crazy thing to happen this year. I think he'll be another high draft pick for Iowa at tight end. They just run a ton of tight end passes. And I mean, he was their leading receiver last year. That's not a good thing. That's also an indictment on the wide receiver room. But my point is, like, if you're going to be more, it doesn't necessarily, just because you're more tight end friendly and your tight ends collect more stats, I don't personally think that means you have better tight ends necessarily, right? Because schools cannot run to the throw to the tight end as much, and they may still be really good blocking tight ends, because obviously, just equal to pass catching ability is the ability to block effectively.
Especially at that position. I mean, for the longest, I look at, and then the other thing is Miami is the originators for a lot of things. Okay, throwing the forwards up, running out of the smoke. Everybody runs out of the smoke now. Turnover props. We were the first ones that came out with the turnover chain, and then, well, technically Alabama had the turnover belt in 2015, and they're technically the original. But we made it cool. I mean, when Miami does something, it becomes cool. It becomes bomb, bam, let's do it. Blah blah blah. Okay, let's look at tight end. Well, up until the mid 90s, you would look at tight end as an extension of the offensive line. Okay. For God knows how many great tight ends could have been previous if they were allowed to get pop passes and out routes and seam routes, but they were basically just more athletic or lighter in the behind tackles who couldn't really get transition into offensive tackle just yet. And they just play tight end maybe early on in their career. They eat their way into playing offensive tackle and they grow from there. The reason why I bring that up is because there's been 2 positions. You could argue quarterback, but other people have done spread concepts at quarterback, BYU and things of that nature before Miami. Well, tight end and 3 technique defensive tackle were made prominent at the University of Miami from the way that we used them in the passing game and tight end, and the way that we had this 4-3 attack, because more people ran the 3-4 in the college schemes and just kind of held it down in the fronts and let linebackers scrape and move. Well, we were the ones who put in a Jerome Brown at the 3 technique defensive tackle. We had a coach who coached Jerome Brown and Russell Maryland, Cortez Kennedy. He was able to go in and walk over to Warren Sapp, who was a tight end recruit, and say, hey, I think you can come play 3 technique defensive tackle for me and be a Hall of Famer. Turns out to be that when he was an outside linebacker tight end prospect out of country, middle of the road, Florida. So here's my thing. When you talk about tight end, the position is so iffy. And I've been a fan of what you all do with them at Iowa because they're demanded to be great at both. They're not supposed to be just extensions of the offensive line that double the 5 technique up to linebacker. They blow people off the ball. Plus, they're also able to, take a kick step and make the defensive end fly and swat them by and be wide open for a pass. And the fact that you all were able to get Fant and the other guy in the same season.
Fant is and I think Fant is the exception. I know you're not a follower or close follower of Iowa football, but if you were, you would know that in 2018, there was a lot of controversy. Noah Fant's brother was all over Twitter criticizing Iowa because Iowa wasn't playing Noah Fant very much in 2018, which seems crazy, but he's kind of that opposite style tight end. Like, I remember at one point, Kirk Ferentz, and this was a mistake, I think, from a PR standpoint, he actually referred to Noah Fant as a specialist because of his skill set. And, he is kind of just a big physical wide receiver in a way. He's that good. He's that athletic. And George Kittle, in a way, has turned into that. But George Kittle did not produce a ton at Iowa. I will say this, too. You're talking about technique and obviously different schools running different stuff. I don't know the history of tight ends standing along the line of scrimmage, but I know Hayden Fry back in the 80s started that at Iowa. I mean, tight ends did not stand, at least at Iowa, until Hayden Fry took over. So this is, obviously, Iowa's only had 2 coaches in the last 40-some years, and Hayden Fry and Kirk Ferentz, but the history of tight end usage and using them heavily in the passing attack, which, of course, makes Iowa a more friendly program for recruits, that has been established for 40-plus years. I do want to ask you this. Best tight ends, if you had to name your top 5, and this is just totally eye test opinion, top 5 tight ends since 2000 at Miami.
Oh,
Because
okay.
on paper, let me just tell you what on paper, it appears to me that the top 5 would be Greg Olson, number 1, Jimmy Graham, number 2, Jeremy Shockey, number 3. I don't know if we'd go Kellen Winslow. What did Bubba Franks do? This shows you how.
Bubba Franks was big time at Miami. 77 receptions, 1,038 yards in his career, and 12 touchdowns. And he had 12 in one season.
So to me,
He
you're probably
statistically had the best touchdown season in Miami history.
Probably a clear top 4, and then David Njoku was a first round, so maybe he would wrap up the top 5. But we're also trying to figure out how much does NFL production tie into this. Maybe top 5 NFL tight ends from Miami.
Right. So I would say college wise, you would have to look at, what would you seem to be the flashy? Because Kellen Winslow would arguably be the number one if you go off of college. I mean, he was out of this world. The man won a Mackey off of what he did his sophomore year, not necessarily what he did his junior year, because as a sophomore, his stats were out of this world. As a junior, he scored 1 touchdown, but he still won the Mackey because he had such a big name for himself as a sophomore. Well, Kellen Winslow, at his time Miami, is the only Mackey Award winner, had 119 receptions for 1,365 touchdowns and 1,365 yards receiving and 10 touchdowns in his career. Okay. And 8 of those came as a junior when he was matched up with, as a sophomore, when he was matched up with Jeremy Shockey. Now, if you talk about the best and most balanced tight end, you would say Kellen Winslow. Now, if you talk about one area could catch a pass and make a guy miss, get down the field, you would have to bring up David Njoku. He might be the most athletic guy at 6'4", 240 some odd pounds, shredded muscle. I mean, he won the West Virginia game in 2016 by himself. We throw a 3rd and 8 out route to him on the short side of the field. He stiffs arm the corners, makes the linebacker miss and beats the safety for 60 yards up the sideline. He hadn't done that all season, and we were like, who's this guy? But he was trying to put on who he could be and had 2 touchdowns, 180 yards in that game, and goes off to be a first-round draft pick. Now, the best pure run blocker, I would have to say, is Jeremy Shockey. It looked like a car crash. Like he would slam down on 4-eye techniques or 5 techniques, and they would go flying.
He's also a good pass catcher, though, too. I mean, it wasn't
absolutely. But he wasn't a guy. He was secured hands. He wasn't a guy that you're going to throw a 60-yard bomb to like you would a Winslow and an Njoku.
Yeah,
you could even split them out wide, and they would give some corners issues. Okay, now Jimmy Graham, just a complete freak. Jump ball, I don't think I pick anybody else in Miami history, especially tight end, would jump ball one-on-one with Jimmy Graham. I mean, 6'8", that's not fair. And he had the route running ability to fade route you. He can go out and be an X or a Y. He didn't have to be a slot or an inline guy because his blocking was kind of iffy. So I guess that would be I would say Winslow number 1. Statistically, you would have to put Bubba Franks number 2. I would go with Olsen 3, Shockey 4, and David Njoku 5. Now, the conversation between Njoku and Graham, I think, is of conversation. But Graham only played 1 season at Miami, had 19 receptions for 100 some odd yards and 5 touchdowns because we put him in the red zone and just throw fade routes to him.
And so to make it clear, most of your rankings here are based upon what they did at Miami, not upon what they did after they left Miami.
Correct.
So now my question is, how does that top 5 compare to, if you're just looking at the top, not collectively through, how does that top 5 compare to Dallas Clark, George Kittle, TJ Hawkinson, who's young, but I would say he's got to be there. And then what would that be? 4? Clark, Kittle, Hawkinson, that's 3. Fant, 4. Again, if we're looking at just Iowa production. And, Scott Chandler's in there, who actually had a nice NFL career. Probably Moyaki after that. But again, that's a tough conversation to have when you're comparing teams in different conferences that run different offenses.
Right. Because then you could turn around and say the Iowa tight end that has 65 receptions for 800 yards and 4 touchdowns in a big I formation Big Ten conference,
Right.
how does that compare to a tight end that's going up against ACC coastal competition, which is a little bit more athletic, not necessarily smash mouth, and they may only have 30 receptions because we don't feed the tight end the ball. How about this? What's your number one tight end? Read off his stats, career stats.
At Iowa?
Right.
Well, I probably would go. I mean, I was pretty young when Dallas Clark was at Iowa. Let me find his stats. That's a good exercise. Let me see if I can find. So Dallas Clark for his career just played 2 years at Iowa, and his total numbers 1,000. So 81 catches for 1,281 yards in 2 seasons, which actually isn't. I mean,
that's pretty good actually.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're in just 2 years, so
Right. That's what I'm saying. That's not bad at all. What is that? 600 some odd yards a season. That's not bad at tight end.
only eight touchdowns for the 2 years combined. Let me find T.J. Hawkins because he was also he's a good one to compare because he was also there for just 2 years, just played 2 years.
Because again, if we're going off of that, statistically, your number one guy wouldn't even make our top 5 stats.
Yeah, I mean that surprised me that he was Dallas wasn't higher. Hawkinson, so Hawkinson ended up with just short of 1,100 yards, 10 touchdowns on 73 receptions. Noah Fant, he was a tight end machine. So again, how much do you place on red zone efficiency? Certainly that could play into it, I guess, as well. He had 19 touchdowns and just under 1,100 yards in basically 2.5 years, 78 catches. So actually very similar to Hawkinson, what Hawkinson did in 2 years. But again, just a touchdown machine in 19 touchdowns in 2.5 seasons.
Right now, those 19 touchdowns would be a Miami record, but the statistic yardage wise. Now, again, like I said, we're comparing different conferences. Yardage wise, your top 3 guys wouldn't even be in our top 5.
And so, what are the? I'm assuming.
Let's go down the line. I'll go with you. Bubba Franks, 77 receptions. This is over 2 years. 77 receptions for 1,038 yards and 12 touchdowns in 2 seasons. That would rank 5th all time in Miami. 6th all time in Miami. Excuse me. 5th all time in Miami. Brevin Jordan, 105 receptions for 1,358 yards and 13 touchdowns. 4th all time. Winslow, 1,300 yards, 1,365 yards and nine touchdowns. That's 4th. It's yards. Olsen, 1,215 yards for 10 touchdowns. And technically, statistically, the highest in Miami, and this is somebody that didn't even make my top 5, is Clyde Walford with 1,735 yards and 14 touchdowns. So that's what I'm saying. How do you want to go with it? That's over. He only started for 3 seasons at Miami also. So,
and I would guess that in general, given Iowa's reputation running the football, even though Iowa's running game has not been consistently good under Kirk, Iowa is a very run heavy offense. So although they produce tight ends that can catch the football, they really ask their tight ends to be able to block in the run game. And so certainly that's going to cut down on production. I'm not making an excuse for the difference in statistics, but a pass heavy offense that already has really good tight ends, those tight ends are going to be more involved and rack up some of those numbers.
Right. And like I said, now the argument, like I said, because if we're going to be based on my own research, statistically, Clyde Walford is the best tight end in Miami Hurricanes history. Statistically speaking, he has the most receptions, he has the most yards, and he has the most touchdowns. Clyde Walford isn't even in my top 5 as far as the contribution he had, and as far as historically at the University of Miami, but stats, and that's why I always talk about those kinds of things. I'm a film guy. Clyde Walford was a pretty good player, and he was Clyde Walford. Let's see how the NFL looked at him. He was a 3rd round pick, 68th overall. He made no Pro Bowls, no All Pros, no All Conference, and no All Americans. But
Now,
he's statistically the best tight end in Miami Hurricanes history.
here is one that I missed. Scott Chandler was played 3 years from 2004 to 2006, 117 catches, 1,467 yards, and 10 touchdowns.
Now that's a career. I like it.
But again, Scott Chandler. I mean, I wouldn't put Scott Chandler in. And maybe that just means I'm misinformed and I'm biased towards some of these more recent guys. But Scott Chandler had a nice career in the NFL,
Right.
long career in the NFL. But he was drafted in the 4th round. But he racked up a lot of numbers in 3 years. And where would that rank in the Miami numbers again? 1467.
1467 would be second all time at Miami, behind Clyde Walford.
Behind Walford. That's interesting, man. I would have never. Again, this is probably my ignorance towards some of those early 2000s teams, but that's a big number. 1467. Right.
That's pretty dang good. And then, like I said, you got to also incorporate culture into it. Now, I know college football is going down this whole path where It's not about your geographic location. It's not about your culture. It's not about your brand of ball. It's about who's paying the biggest bucks and joining that conference. There's talks of Miami either joining the SEC, which I feel like is not good for Miami, or joining the Big Ten, which I think would be great for Miami. Joining there and playing some really good teams that'll force us to play some really good brand of football.
Tight end U versus tight end U. We just settled on the field.
Yay, wouldn't that be perfect?
Let's
line up and go at it, see what happens. But then it's like, now you want to talk about offensive line You want to talk about defensive tackle. I think Iowa's done really good there. You guys just landed the number 1 offensive tackle in the country, beat out Alabama, but he's a local Iowa guy.
He is.
And
they haven't always been able to keep him in the state. Ross Pierschbacher is a guy who ended up going to Alabama several years back and had a good career at Alabama. And I mean, so they haven't already. It is something unique that Kirk Ferentz has done these last 2 years, getting 2 5-stars from Central Iowa to stay home. That's tough to do when Alabama and the big boys,
Ohio State and Georgia come calling. And you know who the recruiter was for that offensive lineman that left Iowa to come to Bama?
For Pierschbacher?
Yeah.
Who?
Mario Cristobal.
Wow.
The funny story about that.
Wow. How do you know that? Curious how you know that. That's a weird fact to know. Ross Pierschbacher's recruiter was Mario Cristobal.
Listen, I've been covering the program for a while. I study a lot. A lot.
So you remember Ross Pierschbacher?
Absolutely.
Because he was a 4, like a high 4-star, I think, according to most. But like, that's not like some great player in Alabama standards. Like, he's a good recruit, but not according to Alabama standards. He wasn't great.
Right. Now, mainly he was brought in, and he was a guard center kind of hybrid.
Yeah.
And he started some games. I mean, he wasn't some elite prospect and had his coffee in the NFL. I don't know if he's still around, but here's the main reason why I know that story. Nick Saban talks really highly of Mario Cristobal, our current head coach. Okay. And the story that he likes to tell is that him and Mario Cristobal almost got in a car accident. Here's why. Mario Cristobal is crazy, is a very fired up guy. And they go into Iowa to recruit. And they're going to find this young man. Now, Mario Cristobal is a Cuban American, born and raised in Miami, Florida. And he's never seen snow. And he's driving.
Uh-oh.
He refused to let Coach Saban drive. He's like, "You're the head coach. I work for you. I got you." And now Nick has had his time, played at Kent State. He's coached at Michigan State. He's been in the snow before, and he understands how you're supposed to drive. Well, Coach Cristobal decides to drive in snow, and he's going like 10 miles an hour trying to get there. They're running late. And, Coach Saban was like, "Man, I'm going to drive. It's all right. I'm the head coach. I know what I'm." So it's one of those funny stories he likes to tell about, the fact that how tenacious and Coach Cristobal was, but it was one of those moments where he was like, "I got the will," and that's
And
the
that's
reason why I
interesting.
know who that is.
Some of those high-profile recruits, because of course Nick Saban and Kirk Ferentz coached on the same NFL staff for a time in let's see in Cleveland.
In Cleveland, correct.
And yeah, that's fascinating. Now we'll say this as it relates to, we're kind of getting off topic, but the offensive line debate. If I'm an offensive lineman, unless I'm concerned with winning national championships, and I'm certainly not saying that shouldn't be a concern of a college kid, but unless I'm concerned with that, I think Caden Proctor made the right decision. And
I agree 1,000%, dude.
Yeah.
You're gonna go first round irregardless, but it's about who's coaching you. The Iowa culture at offensive line is elite. When Coach Cristobal was up at Oregon, he had built an amazing, factory on that offensive line. Well, and Bama just spits out first rounders. That's what it is. But you're the hometown young man. Oh man.
Well, I'll say this. I just looked up Ross Pierschbacher. He is, of course, he originally committed to Iowa. He is listed as the backup center for New York, the Jets.
Okay, so he's still in there.
Beautiful. So he's still around. Now he was drafted in the 5th round. Now I'm not saying that Iowa would have made him a first-round draft pick, but man, he was a highly touted kid. If he goes in the 5th round and ends up not being a starting,
I can still hear you.
A starting offensive lineman in the NFL, to me, I'm not calling him a bust, but you almost wonder, like, that's an example of, I think had he come to Iowa, one could argue that he may have been able to stick in the NFL. Again, I'm sure he's doing just fine, but yeah, I like the decision from Caden Proctor, and I think Iowa has I don't know that they compare. I'd have to look at the top schools. The tight end debate is tight end is such a unique position. It's easy to have this discussion and come up with a few schools off the top of your head. I think it would be harder to come up with an offensive line U debate because, Iowa has a claim in there. I don't probably think they're at the top. Iowa's also done a really nice job producing DBs, and I'm not trying to say that they'd have a claim there either. But Iowa, if you look at the numbers, I believe they're top 5 right now for number of NFL players on active rosters. And you're talking lists that include Bama, Clemson, like all the powers. Bama, Clemson, Ohio State, then Iowa, and then like a bunch of other powers. Iowa's really such an outlier as it relates to the NFL because it's not just one or two positions. Now, they do have some positions they just don't produce. Wide receivers a position they don't produce. Quarterback's a position they don't produce. They don't produce NFL running backs. They've had one or two here and there, but those are those skill positions, especially, and that's of course what holds Iowa back from being elite in college, right? You get a 5-star quarterback in, or you start producing NFL running backs like Wisconsin has done. You pair that with the tight ends and the special teams units they've had and the defenses. We're talking about an elite program. So it's such a unique program. I've been around I've been an Iowa fan my whole life. It's
Are you an alum? Did you go there?
No, I did not. I did not go to, but I grew up in Central Iowa, and I actually live in Ames now, so I live in Cyclone territory. But I'm an Iowa guy, and I still view it, even though I'm an Iowa guy, and this is what I'm used to. I still view it as such a unique place. Like, there's no other school in the country that can say they've had 2 head coaches in the last 44 years. Like, that's insane. That isn't
the only other place you could say would be Tallahassee, but they just let go of theirs. They had Bobby Bowden and then Jimbo Fisher, but now they've had 4, so it kind of grew.
And how long was Paterno at Penn State?
100. Felt like it. I don't know off the top of my head. At least 40 years.
Yeah, because that he of course, obviously now they've had a couple guys, right? But Penn State's been pretty, I won't say clean. That's the wrong word to use when we're talking about Penn State. Definitely the wrong word when we're talking about Penn State. But as far as not a high number of coaches, definitely Penn State would be in that conversation.
That was a good one.
But man, I appreciate you having me on. This has been enjoyable. I hope we can talk another day with Mark. I was kind of disappointed when Mark said he wasn't going to be able to make it, but I thought, you know what? This is a fun conversation, and I think we could have this debate again, measuring NFL stats, because if people want to make that a criteria, that's, I think, a different discussion.
Absolutely, and like I said, I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I got all that NFL stats already written up too, so we can go there, because then I think it flips. A bunch of the guys I had on the higher end of that list, because of their NFL production flip, and guys that
Right.
didn't really have the best NFL college careers hopped up and had great, Hall of Fame
And
NFL careers.
George Kittle is a perfect example of that. I mean, we're
Yeah,
talking a late round pick and a guy who struggled to stay healthy. When he got to Iowa, he looked like he should have been in like 8th grade. Like he was a skinny kid that, is probably, participating in Battle of the Books throughout high school. Like he didn't look like a football player. And now he's like this WWE WrestleMania guy. So it is odd how some of these guys develop, and some of them develop late. You got to give work ethic a bit, that's a big part of it. But I think the culture, and you brought up the culture at the college level, that is an aspect of this as well. And I'd say stability. Like it's going to be harder for a school that doesn't have stability with its coaching staff to be university of anything, right? Like
right.
Penn State, we brought up tight end. They've been able to stay pretty consistent. Obviously, James Franklin's been there. Seems like he's been there for 10 years now. I don't think has he been there 10 years now?
6 or 7, somewhere in there.
But it's going to be hard to
Bandy, and then he took that step when O'Brien left Penn State.
Right. It's going to be hard to consistently produce a position for the NFL if you're constantly changing coaching staffs that have different philosophies and different values.
Right. Now, the conversation, we could just go all day with this, because I love those kind of conversations. I mean, there's only one, the you, but there's plenty of other people who like to have different yous or whatever.
Sure.
But I look at Alabama, all this production, all these NFL first rounders, they're not even really in conversation. Like, because I guess at the end of the day, people stand out, but then it felt like under the last regime of Alabama taking over college football, not too many of their players really stand out. It's just like you could look at similar to USC, you could rip the last names off of some of those jerseys to where you don't know these young men by name, and then you would still see some of the same production and some of the same scheme wise. But what made Miami great was the way that it stood out with swag and attitude and tenacity and things of that nature. You look at Iowa. You had I know his last name is King. Is it Corey King?
Desmond
King. I mean, was he a first or a second rounder?
Oh, I think that's a good question. I know he was going to be a first rounder, and he came back, which was probably a mistake in hindsight. He came back for that 16th season. But yeah, King, Greg Maben, Josh Jackson's not been great in the NFL, but he was a really good product coming into the league.
Who was the one that caught that one-hander against
That was Jackson. That was Josh Jackson. He had three and a hat trick in that game, 3 picks in that game against Ohio State.
Good God.
And the other thing is, too, when you have a coach like Phil Parker, talk about stability. I mean, he's been the defensive backs coach here since Kirk took over. So, I mean, you understand why Iowa can stake a claim for DBU, because, I mean, everybody loves Phil Parker, Amari Spivey. We didn't mention him. Jovan Johnson, who was an all-conference guy. I mean,
who's the guy you guys have now?
Well, Riley Moss was the defensive back of the year last year, and I think
is he a corner or a safety?
He's a corner.
Okay, is he like this is really controversial? Is he like the only white corner in college football?
I mean, he's the only white corner that I know about.
It was mind-blowing. I was like, is he?
Well, here's the deal, and I'm not saying this got nothing to do with race, and you brought this up, right?
Right.
I don't. How do I put this delicately? If anybody watches my channel, I'm a little bit nervous with the Riley Moss hype, because he was named defensive back of the year last year, largely based upon taking a lot of chances and getting a lot of picks. And those votes, and he got burned at times. And I think those kind of got overlooked. He's got some things to prove, because if he didn't, he'd be in the league now. He opted to come back for an extra year because I think the scouts said, hey, you need an extra year. So I'm still skeptical on him. He's a good cornerback. And yeah, you're right. We don't see a lot of white corners. There was a guy years ago in the league that was a decent white corner. I think he played for the Giants. You know what I'm talking about?
It was like a thing. It was like
yes.
It's 20 years or 15. Like it was. And again, having things in we're having a respectful conversation.
Absolutely.
We're not attacking either or.
No.
I'm saying this because when people screen record and say blah, 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 blah,
No.
hopefully they leave this part in the video. But there was a dude who was he played for the Washington Giants. He played for the Giants.
Yeah.
Now the guy, Seahorn Giants, and he played at USC.
That's right.
Then this past year, they had the first guy who broke the mold again, and he plays for the
Who is
Washington
that?
Commanders now. I don't know his name off the top of my head, but
Okay.
he was all over Twitter, and everybody was like, "Finally, we can get over that. That's not a joke
Yeah,
anymore."
yeah.
You know?
We're a lack of white guys in the NFL. That we're come
Right,
down to.
exactly. And like we always
Oh,
say that, it has nothing to do with it. We have biracial black or white
yeah,
quarterbacks, we got white and black
absolutely.
offensive linemen and all kinds of stuff. So stuff has really gone past that. And thank God for it that we've kind of gotten past that kind of
Well, and I'll say this:
thinking.
I have no doubt Riley Moss will play in the league. I'm just skeptical that. I mean, defensive back of the year, you would think, hey, he's the defensive back of the year in the Big Ten, and he's from Iowa. He's going to be a first or second round draft pick. And I'll tell you this right now: in no way is he right now would he go in the first or second round. He'd probably get a late flyer, maybe fourth round, but you're probably talking like fifth or sixth. So he'll play in the league, and you're right, he's still one of the few white corners in the league, but he's got some things to prove. Xavier Wampa is a 5-star safety. He's a kid that played with Caden Proctor at Southeast Polk here
Gotcha.
in Central Iowa. So he'll be a safety,
Gotcha.
likely be a safety at Iowa. And they actually have another guy who's interesting enough. We're talking about race. Got another guy who was listed as a corner last year, and he's kind of play Iowa's hybrid linebacker safety hybrid position this year. Cooper DeJean. He's a really athletic guy who can play corner. Played a little corner late in the year last year, but Phil Parker knows what he's doing in that respect. There was something else that I wanted to bring up to you, and I'm blanking on what it was. Well, hopefully we can have this conversation again, and I won't blank out.
No, it was fun for me. I definitely I was waiting, and I was like, oh man, we probably can't do it because I know you probably were sending the information to Mark, and because we didn't have each other's contact, but now we
Yeah,
do, so that's
now
no
we do.
problem. I'll throw you this one. What do you think about college football expansion? I don't know if you've talked about this on your channel, but
No.
the Big Ten has reached out and added Los Angeles, USC, UCLA. Some people are like, that's a bad culture fit. I think it's beautiful. I think if the Big Ten had the argument of being like coast to coast, sea to sea, we cover all of college football, I think that would be beautiful. I've always felt like Pitt should be in the Big Ten if you already have Penn State, but I get it. Pitt and Penn State
They
in
don't
there.
really do anything for the conference financially. They don't
No, yeah,
really
I guess, yeah.
you don't really do anything competitively. I mean, they had it obviously last year with Kenny Pickett, but I don't expect that program to. I mean, that program has not been consistently elite in my lifetime. So, but yeah, I get what you're saying. I'm okay with the expansion to LA, and it's a survival of the fittest right now. If I'm the Big Ten, I'd very much look at Florida. Very much look at Florida. I'm not talking about Florida State. I'm talking about Miami. I think Georgia Tech is an interesting player. I've said that for a while now. I think they're a very
Facts.
intriguing ad.
Preach.
I mean,
Preach.
that's an intriguing ad if I'm the Big
Preach.
Ten. If
The
I'm the
only
Big
reason why I would say is because they're an original SEC member. People don't know that. Georgia Tech is actually in the Alabama fight song. Like they used to, like Georgia Tech was in the original members of the SEC, so they may go back and join them. But I
they
think it
could,
would be a great combo
but again,
for
what
them to
does that
join them.
add? I don't think Georgia Tech adds anything for the SEC. They've already got Georgia. Competitively, Georgia Tech has not been real good since what late 2000s, like 2009, 10. Of course, they played Iowa in an Orange Bowl in 2010. I think Georgia Tech's an interesting player because it would expand the footprint down into a very fertile recruiting ground. Certainly, you get down into Miami, that's a whole different territory. I think Florida State is an interesting ad. They've got rich history. Lately, they've kind of been erratic, as you know. That program, it's just been a very strange series of events. I mean, you go from
I
being
love every
national,
second of it.
but I mean, even Clemson is an interesting one. Do they end up in the? I expect them to end up in the SEC someday.
Yeah.
But is that the best move for them? Probably, but I don't know. I do think Oregon, Washington are good considerations. I don't have a problem with Stanford. I don't know that Cal is a great option simply because it doesn't seem like they really value academics, or excuse me, value athletics. They value
Right.
academics. They don't really value athletics.
And I think in the Big Ten, you got to have both. It
Yeah.
might be the most well versed conference in all of college football.
Well, yeah, they've got standards that I think some fans who are just care about the athletic side of things don't really understand, but they do. They want everybody to be an AAU school. Right now, Nebraska's not. They lost that accreditation. Now, is Miami an AAU school? That's a question for you.
No.
So that's going to
But
be a
I don't think
problem.
they ever. I don't know if they ever applied for it. They could. I mean, we rank in the top 50 in the country, so we could easily apply for it if need be.
It's got to do something with research, and again, I don't know how all that works, but that's been a continued topic. But no, I would say, if I'm answering your question, I'm fine with the USC UCLA moves from the traditionalist point of view. I understand why people don't like it because of, they think of conferences as being regional, and that's just not the facts anymore. That's not. There's a conference in college basketball. I don't remember which conference it is, but there's a conference in college basketball that's playing schools on the East and West Coast already. So this is happening, and now that it's happening with Power 5 schools and in college football, people are starting to worry. But it is what it is. You can't control it. The SEC has made moves with adding Oklahoma and Texas to where if you don't respond, and you can't respond, like there are no moves in the Big Ten footprint from a regional point of view. There are no moves in the Big Ten footprint that even come close to being able to even the scales with SEC. The only way the Big Ten can do that is adding USC, UCLA, which they did. And I think potentially, I shouldn't say there's nobody. Notre Dame would certainly help. You add Notre Dame, and I think if you add Notre Dame, USC, and UCLA, then I think we're close. If the SEC adds Miami, Florida State, and Clemson, then I still give the SEC the nod. If Iowa or if the Big Ten then added Oregon and Washington, maybe I'd still give the SEC a slight edge. But this is just a battle of the fittest, and the Big Ten had to make a move, and I think they made a good move.
I think it was a great move because now here's the thing. You got to be able to pull eyes, right? Now, helmets on the football field is one thing. That's what people who love football care about. But the ADs and they care about another thing, the construct and the quality of matchups and finances that come in, right? But then the people who sign their checks, okay, the higher ups, all they care about is eyes, ratings, and money. Okay. The University of Miami has won 10 games one time in the last 12 years or 15 years. Okay. And we still pull great ratings when we play certain
Absolutely.
teams. It's just it is what it is. Okay. Now the University of Iowa, or is it Iowa University or University of Iowa?
University of Iowa.
Okay, the University of Iowa, I don't know if they pull ratings, big ratings, unless Iowa State is a great game every year. How many people nationally turn in and watch that game?
That's a good question. Mark would know. I don't know.
Well, yeah, he would know that off the top of his head. But when you guys were upsetting Ohio State, that last half of that, it was like everybody tuning in to see why, because Ohio State was losing. It wasn't about the quality of ball that Iowa was producing. The year prior to that, you all beat a top 3 ranked Michigan team that was supposed to ride off into the sunset. Okay, and they lost on the road at Iowa. Okay, and the reason those ratings at the end of the year were high, why? Because you were beating Michigan. It wasn't about Iowa.
Right.
So when I look at what the Big Ten can do, they could legit have an argument of having a marquee program in all big football states like Ohio, like California, like Florida. If they were to add the University of Miami, I don't think. And also, Miami has always been different from everyone else in the state. Geographically, we're borderline South America. Like we're the Caribbean island,
Yeah.
Geographically speaking. We're not the Florida Gators. We don't handle things in the way that we carry ourselves and play like the Florida Gators. We definitely don't carry ourselves and act the way Tallahassee does. So they can go join the SEC. Geographically, it makes sense for them. It fits for them. Thumbs up. For Miami, I think going to the Big Ten makes a lot of sense. We're a really high academic institution. When it comes to research, our big thing is U Health, and it's trying to find a cure for cancer. And also, we have really big sea aquatic research with helping in that department and cleaning the earth and all that kind of stuff. That's their thing. So they probably can get into AAU because they do those other kinds of things.
Right.
But talk about matchups. The 4 teams that would be a perfect addition for you all. 2 of them you already got. The other 2 would be pulling Notre Dame out of the independent and going down and grabbing Miami out of Miami. It would be that to me would be a big boom, and the SEC would have to go. Okay,
Better ad though, Miami or Clemson? Hey, it's got to be Clemson, right? I mean, right now
Yeah.
it's probably still Clemson. Are you assuming then Clemson ends up in the SEC?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they've always wanted to be that. They're still pissed because here's the funny part. Clemson and South Carolina, I'm a historian. Clemson and South Carolina both used to be ACC teams.
Right.
And they're still pissed that they chose South Carolina over Clemson. And South Carolina got into the SEC instead of Clemson. I mean, they've always wanted to be known as an SEC program, but right there in the heart of SEC country, it kind of just makes sense.
Well, I
The
do
other team,
wonder.
say, is UNC. I think North Carolina would be a great addition for Big Ten also.
But do you split up Duke and North Carolina? That's the question. Do you split those two teams up?
Absolutely. I mean, whatever.
Well, we're talking about this from a football perspective, but those two schools care about basketball, right? I mean, I'd
add them too if you want to.
Yeah,
we know Duke could definitely. I mean, who wouldn't want to watch Duke and Northwestern, right? The battle of the intellects.
Listen, from an academics standpoint, those schools would fit the bill, right?
Absolutely. North Carolina's big. Virginia's an amazing academic institution. They would fit in, but I mean, here now you have to start to bridge those conversations. So let me ask you this: how big do you think the Big Ten would want to get?
That's a tough question. I mean, we're speculating on. I do think we're going to have surprises, like all the speculation out there. I mean, since the moves to add USC and UCLA, the talk has been Oregon, Washington. That was where it went first, and then we got wind. Oh, Stanford's in the mix. They want Notre Dame, which they've always wanted Notre Dame, but those are basically the schools that get brought up. I don't know that. I think we're going to have surprises. So, do I think they'll get to 20 teams? Is that the end goal in time?
24?
It may be 24. I don't know. I can't even envision what college football looks like if the SEC and the Big Ten both end up with 24. I don't even really know what that looks like. I mean, scheduling models and revenue sharing, I just don't know what that looks like anymore, because you don't have like networks. You have enough networks to support these games. You know, it's an odd situation. And it's just like the world. The rich keep getting richer. It's going to be that, the SEC and the Big Ten are going to continue to pull away from these other conferences. And I know the Pac-12's in a fight to try to survive. And, the Big 12 did all they could last year. I think you and I would both agree. They did everything they could last year with 4 solid ads. And despite those ads, they're still not even close to what the Big Ten and the SEC have moving forward. So there are no more moves to make. The only moves to make are the ones we assume will happen. And that, at least up until I've had this conversation with you, I've always assumed since this discussion that Miami, Clemson, Florida State all end up in the SEC, which means the Big Ten has to get Oregon, Washington, Notre Dame, of course, USC and UCLA. And if they do that, then the stakes are similar. And then, who adds who? Is there a Georgia Tech in the mix? We talked about Pittsburgh. So I don't know if the end game is 20 or 24. The one thing Mark and I always talk about is college football. One thing I love college football. I know you love college football. The one thing about the sport that's so irritating is everything takes so long to happen, actually happen. And the playoff expansion and all that. I mean, these things we're having schedules released. We had a schedule leak. Iowa playing Northern Iowa in 2029. Right. I mean, who cares?
That shouldn't be a thing.
But it is. It is. Right. Why do we do that? The NFL makes, releases their schedule just months before the season starts. That's the way it should be done. And I would get more excited in talking about expansion. I know people like to talk about it, but I get more excited if these things weren't years down the road. And I believe we have to wait till 2024 for USC and UCLA to join the Big Ten. So right. It seems so far away.
And see, that's why I say I could talk about college football for 8 hours. That doesn't bother me. Here's my thing. We got to be able to have. I think having a college football commissioner would be big.
A czar.
Right, because I look at I don't mind the NFL model. I like watching NFL games, but I know what I'm looking at. I'm looking at pro ball. Okay, the difference in those games isn't about the fact that the young man didn't get enough sleep last night because he's crying on the phone with his girlfriend because she's mad at him about this, and he had to stay up and write a paper of that, and blah, 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 and then he had to still show up and go play ball the next day. these guys out here are all either 100,000aires or millionaires, and they're the best players and some of the best coaches going at it. Okay, we'll just see what happens, and they all shake hands and ride off into the sunset.
Right.
The step below, it's a little bit more visceral. Okay, when NC State plays UNC, it's not about shaking hands and kissing babies. I want to destroy you. Okay, and that's just how it is. We take a little bit more pride in that. I even look at, I'm a Ravens fan. My mother is a Steelers fan. And when they played, it was just like, oh, okay, well, your Steelers won, my Ravens lost. If my mom happened to be a Tallahassee fan, we probably wouldn't speak for about a week. That's how serious we take it
Yeah.
at the college football level. But all this pro talk and having Nick Saban being like the person who's always talking about the pro model, the pro model, the pro model, I don't know. Maybe we look a year from today, and both teams are basically, both conferences, the Big Ten and the SEC, are basically trying to make two big 32-team conferences, split it down the middle. Have the 4-team pods that play each other. You go from there. Heck, the ACC did the new pod, the 3-3-5 pod. So maybe they're even trying that out there. So all we know is that college football will never look the same.
No.
It just isn't going to be.
And just to piggyback on this, and then we can end this discussion. The NIL, to have all this paired with NIL is a wicked combination. Maybe wicked's the wrong. I don't want to give the wrong impression. I know,
right? Not a negative connotation.
Yeah, it's just a crazy, crazy combination, and I don't know what the future. You talked about a commissioner in Azar. We need somebody in charge that can look at this and say, okay, how do we logistically and legally make a salary cap for players? Because if you don't, it's just going to be what I brought up: the rich getting richer. Literally,
right,
these universities that have the most money that can pay for their rosters. And I think University of Miami. Look at the deal that Nigel Pack got. I don't think Miami is going to be suffering from NIL, but teams like Iowa could. So it's an unsteady landscape. But I think if you're Iowa, you're happy. Miami's in a better position as it relates to NIL. Iowa is in a better position right now as it relates to conference, where they lie in their respective conference. But I do think Miami, somebody will want Miami, whether the Big Ten or the SEC. When the time comes, somebody will want Miami.
Right, and for all we know, we could be the Rebels and join the Big 12. I don't know what happened. Now we also have to understand that this is in conversation that the ACC is just going to fall apart. Well, the ACC is not a bad conference. Yes, we just have Clemson and everyone else kind of behind them. There's a clear tier 1, Clemson. There's a clear tier 2.
There doesn't have to be.
State.
There doesn't.
Right, we'll see. I'm just saying, as far as right now, we'll see once we start playing games. But who's to say that the ACC doesn't partner with the Big 12 and they become a combo? You never know. So I think that it's going to be between the Big Ten and the SEC because those are clearly the best 2 conferences.
But the programs with the most potential in the ACC at the top far outweigh the programs with the most potential in the Big 12. I don't think it's even close. Like, you look at what Clemson, the history there, even just recent history. You look at the history of Miami, Florida State. Just take those 3 schools. What 3 schools in the Big 12 can even come close to that? Now that Oklahoma and Texas are gone, who are we looking at? Texas Tech?
Yeah.
Who are we looking at?
Baylor and OU, or Baylor and Oak State. Yeah.
Yeah, BYU is maybe in that. That's crazy. They weren't even part of a Power 5 conference, and they're not even part of a Power 5 conference yet. So, the ACC is definitely in third place as it relates to positioning, and I still think the Pac-12. Because of the fact that Pac-12 still has Oregon and Washington, who each have somewhat rich histories to some extent, they have more to offer in realignment than the Big 12 does.
Absolutely. I agree 1,000%. Man, what a great show. I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Appreciate you having me. I'm glad you looked at the live chat. I'm like, Mark, and I did see he just texted me back. I know he had something come up, but I'm glad we touched base, and we'll definitely do this again. Just anytime. You just shoot me you got my Twitter now. Shoot me a text, shoot me a DM, and we'll delve into the tight end, maybe the NFL end of things next time.
Heck yeah. I would love to do that. And then, once things are answered, maybe we find out where Miami's going or whatever. Heck, we could even do a halfway through the season review of both our teams and,
Let's
and
do it.
things of that nature. Yeah, I would love it.
All right, man. Appreciate the
All right,
time.
thank you.
Have a
No
great
problem.
night.
God bless. All right. Well, thank you all so much. We ended up doing it. It was fun. Shout out to Corey. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Corey, for hopping on. Thank you so much, Mark Rogers, for allowing me the opportunity to come on and speak about the University of Miami and answer some questions. And we were also able to figure out how to do the Iowa Miami tight end U battle. Uh, Thank you all. Thank you all so much. I got to get out of here and get something to eat, man, and get some medicine in my system, man. I'm still not feeling too good. But start talking about college football, get all fired up and want to get after it. So things of that nature. But hey, appreciate y'all so much for coming through. You all know the way I leave every show that I can, especially if I run it. I'll do it here on Mark Rogers TV. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you've done. But people will never forget how you made them feel. Dr. Maya Angelou. This has been the host, One Holloway, bringing to you great quality content when it comes to this you on Mark Rogers TV, Miami Hurricanes. Have a great day. God bless. And as always, go Canes.